episode, I want to compare dividend growth ETFs and give you my opinion which one to use. First of all, we need to establish what is a dividend growth investment strategy. So basically the idea behind it is that you invest into companies that consistently increase their dividends and have solid balance sheets. The idea behind it is that you expect companies that grow their dividends and have their business is growing, that they will do so in the future. So that's why this strategy got very popular in recent days. So my idea is to give you an overview of what different options we have and how they're comparing to the overall market. So the three ETFs I looked at are the three biggest ones, or at least I find them the most relevant ones. There's a big distinction between dividend growth ETFs and normal dividend ETFs. Normal high dividend ETFs, they're more focused on the actual yield, but quality is not necessarily the first priority, which is different to the dividend growth ETFs. The three I'm comparing here are the iShare Dividend Growth ETF, DGRO, the Vanguard Dividend Appreciation ETF, VIG, and the WisdomTree US Quality Dividend Growth ETF, DGRW. All of them have quite a big asset under management, so they're relatively liquid. You can see the WisdomTree is the smallest one with 2 billion, and the Vanguard one with 48, the biggest one. The fees are relatively reasonable and low in iShare and Vanguard, however slightly high on WisdomTree. From a dividend perspective, you can see the yield on iShare and WisdomTree are definitely above the market, above the S&P 500, with Vanguard ETF sitting very close to the actual S&P 500. We can have a look later on a bit on what's the reason behind it. But I guess the main differentiation is here that they selected companies that have higher quality, and that's why the yield is slightly lower here. So let's look into it. For DGRO, we can see the biggest sectors are financials, information technology, healthcare, industrials, and consumer staples, with the biggest names that we can see as well on the higher section in the S&P 500, like Microsoft, JP Morgan, Apple, Verizon, Johnson & Johnson. If we compare this now with the VIG, we can see the biggest sectors here are industrials, consumer services, and consumer goods. So if we compare it to DGRO, for example, we can see there's a less focus on technology, and as well this what we can see here in the largest holdings. So we can see Microsoft is still up there, but otherwise we can see a lot of consumer goods companies and consumer services. So this is a bigger focus on this ETF. The DGRW, we can see again a very high focus on information technology, industrials, and healthcare, and on the first place consumer staples. So if we look again here at the top 10 holdings, we find a lot of technology plays here, as well as industrials and healthcare. But there's definitely a change to what we saw in the other ETFs. Okay, which one is performing best? I first did a backtest 6 years. This was the time when all of them were available. This is the longest time I can go back with. So we can see the performance is relatively close. In the end, the best performance came from WisdomTree, just by very small difference, followed by the iShare one. The Vanguard ETF is kind of lacking. It started to lag a bit after 2016, when I guess we saw a lot of growth in technology, and because it has less allocation to technology, we saw this underperformance. But in the end now it kind of catched up, and you can see there's only like a 3% difference now. And if we go to the next slide, which is the 3-year backtest, actually the Vanguard one is now the highest performing one, and we can see even during 2019 it was outperforming the others. So now, how is the whole strategy stacking up against the S&P 500? In the end, whatever we do, we always need to benchmark against the market. So you can see the difference is rather small. Again, this is the 6-year backtest. We can see the S&P 500 coming in the middle, just below the wisdom tree and iShares 1, and the Vanguard ETF slightly below that. But everything very close, right? Is only like a 2% difference. Again, if we look here at the 3-year backtest, we can see the Vanguard ETF, which is outperforming relatively significantly. We're talking about 5%, so that's 1.5% each year, more or less, which is not bad. But overall, the difference is not that big. So now you think, which one is the best one? I think overall you should see the difference to the S&P 500. So I guess this episode showed as well there's not a big performance improvement in dividend growth ETFs. Of course, you can always do stock picking and potentially outperform the market. But from ETF perspective, the difference is not that big. In addition, I would say that if your portfolio is already geared towards technology, if you're holding technology stocks or trading the Qs, and therefore you're maybe over leveraged on technology, the Vanguard ETF is more value oriented, which might make more sense to mix it with your existing portfolio. And the other way around, if you're more value focused, if you're more income focused, then maybe you want to get the technology exposure that you have in the iShares and the wisdom tree one. So I hope this was a helpful episode for you. If you liked the video, subscribe. Please click the like button and share it with your friends. If you have any questions, send me email and I will cover them on the show.